The early morning bell rang 7 times, and as the sun shone through the window into the house, the 11-year-old John, who was nestled in the quilt, opened his eyes helplessly and got up from the warm bed. If he gets up again, his mother's voice will probably spread all over the street again. How about long-bodied children who don't have enough sleep? Especially at breakfast on weekends. John muttered as he brushed his teeth. Parents never consider the mood of children, this rule is universal in the world. 11-year-old John Smith was born in Greenwich, southeast of London. This small town famous for the meridian has now become a tourist attraction due to the relocation of the observatory. The Smith family has lived here for generations. If there is anything different from other homes, it is indeed a little different. This is also an event that caused a huge impact on John himself. His mother by blood, and now the mistress of the Smith family, Lynn Smith, is a witch. John also completely concluded based on some of his mother's remarks that he really came to the magical world written by J.K. Rowling. John Smith, whose Chinese name is John, is a rebirth. As a socialist successor who has grown up in the 21st century, he has been studying hard under the strict spurs of his parents since childhood. Although his talent is not too high, his hard work will be rewarded. A month before his death, he had just received a postgraduate admission letter from a university. This made his parents quite happy, they completely let go of the control on him, and even he and his friends were not prevented from traveling to the UK. Then he had an accident and died in a car accident in a foreign country. In his previous life, John was never a safe and well-behaved child even though it was in the eyes of teachers and parents, but he was keen to browse articles about mysterious things and various legends while he was studying. Others paid attention to celebrities. For Lace News, he focuses on academic achievements such as deciphering, magic, grotesque stories, and the shift of famous scientists to study philosophy. The Harry Potter series, as the most successful book in the wizarding world, will naturally not be missed by him. But, this should definitely not be a reason for him to cross into the magical world. Of course, the overall situation is set, complaining will never solve the problem, at least when he goes abroad. He also bought an insurance that the beneficiary is his parents. There is a younger brother in the family, and his parents don't need to worry about his old age. So after experiencing several repeated worldview reconstructions during his infancy, John completely accepted this fact. He was reborn as a witch's child, and is about to become a little wizard. "John, what are you doing? Come down." Mom's shout came from his ear, and John rinsed his mouth quickly, put on his shirt and went downstairs. Mr. Love Smith is eating breakfast at the table on the first floor while reading the newspaper. Although his wife is a witch, he is a real ordinary person. As a professor of sociology at the University of Greenwich, Mr. Smith, who already has status and money, has shown considerable interest in the fact that his wife is a witch, and even wanted to enter the wizarding world to find out, but it is a pity that Smith the lady has been preventing this from happening. "Dad, hasn't my letter arrived yet?" "Oh, I'm sorry, dear, I think if there is a letter from you, your mother will notify you as soon as possible, isn't it?" Mr. Smith blinked at John, obviously to remind John not to forget his father's little wish. John was silent, pretending not to see. Turning his head to look at the kitchen, Mrs. Smith was walking out of it with a plate of French fries. She looked like an ordinary housewife, not like a witch at all. This is of course the appearance. As her son, John knows very well that this housewife is actually a staff member of the Mystery Department of the British Ministry of Magic. This department is extremely mysterious and does not have any sense of existence. Even John, who has read the original several times and basically remembers the plot, has no other impression of this department except for the one in the prophecy hall. But since John was born, this job has become dispensable. At least John has never seen his mother go to work. "Well, she is just a housewife," John murmured silently in his heart, and stuffed a piece of French fries into his mouth. Although his mother's craftsmanship has been eaten for several years, the French fries are still delicious. A family gathered around the dining table for breakfast. The scene was warm and harmonious. Of course, there was also an owl Carly with pale green feathers who ate with them. It was Mrs. Smith's pet. It stands to reason that the school will send the admission letter by tonight, but don't worry if you don't send it. It may be that your age is not enough. Of course, this is rare. Seeing her son's nervousness, Mrs. Smith comforted. You reading www.yuyugonshu.com. John nodded indifferently, and suppressed the tension in his heart. Half of the tension was because he was finally entering Hogwarts, who had thought about it countless times before, and the other half was worried that he was not enough this year to enroll and would have to wait until the next year, although theoretically is old enough, but everything is afraid of accident. He really doesn't want to have any entanglement with the Harry Potter trio. At least until he has the power to protect himself, the less contact the better. Fortunately, his worries did not come true. Halfway through his breakfast, an owl flew in from the window, threw the pale yellow envelope on the table, and landed next to Carly the owl. The two owls touched each other's beaks, and then shared breakfast in Carly's lunchbox. Mrs. Smith went to add bird food to the lunchbox, and John picked up the letter with his father. Like the description in the book in memory, the envelope is made of heavy parchment paper, and the address is written in emerald green ink without a stamp. John turned the envelope over and saw a wax seal, a shield coat of arms, and a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounded by the capital H letter. Greenwich 56 Kettering Avenue. Having breakfast received by Mr. John Smith. Oh! This word is really well written. Mr. Smith appeared to be more excited than John, as if he was about to go to the magic school. Let's open it quickly and take a look. What is written in it? Of course, John, who has completely calmed down at the moment, knew what was written in it. He probably read that passage more than a dozen times. After all, he was a kid who loved Harry Potter. Which kid doesn't want to be a student at Hogwarts? Mr. Smith had no idea what John was thinking. He had already opened the envelope, looked at the contents, cleared his throat and read, Principal of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Albus Dumbledore. Dear Mr. John Smith, we are happy to inform you that you have been approved to study at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. A list of required books and equipment is attached. The semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will be waiting for your owl to bring your reply before July 31st. Vice Principal Minerva? Yours sincerely, McGonagall. Then there is a long list of books and essential supplies that Mr. Smith can't understand. Let me see. Mrs. Smith wrote her reply and gave it to the owl, who came to take it away. She also walked over at this time. She picked up the item list and looked up and down a few times, and said, The 2 books Theory of Magic and Dark Force, A Guide to Self-Defense are not the same as I was back then, except that they are not as bad as I remembered. Many, thanks to Ravenclaw, my memory has not deteriorated. I want to deliver the book tomorrow. But John, it seems we should still go to Diagon Alley. Your uniform, wand, and pets are all you need to be there in person. Go today? John asked. He still felt a little sudden to open the door to the wizarding world so soon. Of course, my dear. Mrs. Smith glanced at her husband, and she seemed to point out, otherwise someone will definitely take this opportunity to follow. After she said this, she said to Mr. Smith, My dear, don't you want to go to school to attend an academic seminar? Go ahead, although today is the weekend, it is always a bad thing to be late. John avoids the groaning sight projected by his father in good time. He clearly distinguishes the situation. Mrs. Smith has the highest status in this family. Although his father often disagrees, he is always the one who is the most dependent on his wife's orders. It's fine if you don't help him. If you help him, you will face the mixed suppression of your parents. He is not so stupid. So the resentful Mr. Smith drove away from the house. John watched his mother wave his wand and changed his outfit. He was guessing whether it was apparition or riding a flying broom, when he was led by his mother to the fireplace. Is Flo Ned again? John was a little disappointed, but not surprised. After all, this is the safest and most convenient way. When he was a child, he used the flu net several times to visit his grandmother's house. He had personally experienced the flu net. At least there was no uncomfortable feeling. It was much better than the uncomfortable apparition transformation in the legend. After several years of practical testing, he has a lot of understanding of the world, and a large part of this understanding is different from the content of his previous life. For example, this world is not a low demon's world as stated in the previous online forums. Actually, since his last life, John did not think that there is a high and low difference between the world. Perhaps there are differences in size between each world, but the levels between them should be similar. But just like human beings, the world also has a life cycle. When the world is at a mysterious peak, magic or technology will always prevail, but one is the highest point and the other is the lowest point. As for which one is the high point, it depends on the tendency of the world itself. The world of Harry Potter and the real world of the previous life are on the same planet. According to the common characteristics of the whole world, the world of Harry Potter is obviously a mysteriously inclined world. The reason is also very simple. In the era of prosperous technology, magic still exists. This is an example. It is conceivable that if the Ministry of Magic releases restrictions, the various technologies of the wizarding world may surpass the science and technology of the same period for hundreds of years. According to John's research, the decline of this magical world is almost over. According to the original plot, since the protagonist Harry Potter enrolled in the school, the magic of the world gradually began to recover, such as the magic stone that can be turned into gold, the magic stone that can extend life indefinitely, the resurrection magic of the Dark Lord Voldemort, Grindelwald, Dumbu, the existence of great wizards such as Leto, and even some mediocre little wizards learn spells much faster than before. These are all proofs. He caught up with a good time. John, who was dragged into the fireplace by his mother, thought so in his heart. He had no idea of fighting Voldemort. That was the mission of Harry Potter, the son of the protagonist's plane. John's character and interests made him want to be a man even more. Scholars who explore the nature of the world. Ordinary people can find the essence of the world through mathematics and physics. Why can't they do research through magic? You know, he has not only recorded the plot about the direction of the world, the powerful spells that have appeared, the names of the potions, and even the interesting spells written on the potions book that Snape has researched. He remembered it clearly. As long as he has a magic wand, he can try to practice magic. He, John, is the future great magician and world-class magician. This kid, can you not block the exit of the fireplace? There was a slightly older female voice behind him. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com. John then recovered and hurriedly let go. Mrs. Smith was talking to a witch shopkeeper not far away. The two seemed so close that Mrs. Smith didn't notice that her son was not following. Maybe it's because Diagon Alley is too safe. John narrowed his mouth, glanced at the back of the old witch who had just left, and walked to the side of Mrs. Smith. Oh, is this little John? What a handsome boy! John smiled and said hello. He was a little uncomfortable with the warm praise of the witch shopkeeper. Of course, his appearance inherited his parents, and he was indeed handsome, but he didn't like people always staring at him. Look at it. It's good to wait for Hogwarts. There are all good-looking people. Try to keep a low profile. It is estimated that you can avoid being noticed. Fortunately, Mrs. Smith finally found his uncomfortable, and said goodbye to the witch friend briefly, and then took John into Diagon Alley. The textbooks and other things were pre-ordered for him by Mrs. Smith. Because of the existence of owls, the delivery service in the wizarding world was many years earlier than in the real world. Generally speaking, only wizards from Muggle families would purchase textbooks in person. But the clothes and wand must come in person. After measuring the size at Mrs. Morgan's robe shop, the mother and son went to the magic wand shop. The only wand shop in Diagon Alley is not as shabby and small as described in the original book, and there is even a young witch working here. John cast his gaze to the sign at the door, which was a familiar string of English. Ollivander, a sophisticated wand has been made since 382 BC. John followed his mother into the magic wand shop. There was a mother and daughter walking out of the shop, apparently choosing the wands for enrollment. Mrs. Smith and the witch mother nodded at each other, even though they didn't know each other. The young witch received in the shop hall led Mrs. Smith to sit on a bench to wait, and then led John to a space separated by a curtain at the back of the hall. The famous wand maker master, Mr. Ollivander, was standing on the ladder to sort out the wand. The witch waiter whispered to John to wait, and then retired. John quietly watched Mr. Ollivander float up and down the ladder. He looked at the wall formed by the long and narrow cardboard boxes, and suddenly remembered a description in the original book. He read out softly, "The dust and silence here seem to make people feel that there is a mysterious magic hidden." That's it. John asked himself that he couldn't think of such a straightforward and beautiful description, but this did not prevent him from remembering the description in the book. Oh, a very novel statement. Mr. Ollivander had already climbed down the stairs for some time and walked to John's face. "Good afternoon." "Oh, hello, are you Mr. Ollivander?" John said nervously. "Oh, yes, don't be nervous." Mr. Ollivander said, "I know I will see you soon, John Smith, this is not a problem. Your eyes are almost the same as your mother's. She came here to buy her first a magic wand, it's almost like yesterday." Good familiar lines. John seriously suspected that Mr. Ollivander had said this to every wizard who came here to buy a magic wand, but he would not be so stupid to expose the matter, just smile in cooperation. "Well, Mr. Smith, come on, let me see." Ollivander coughed twice and picked it up from the workbench. "Which hand are you good at?" "Oh, I am used to using my right hand." John raised his hand and asked Ollivander to measure the size for him, first from the shoulder to the fingertip, then from the wrist to the elbow, shoulder to the floor, knee to the armpit, and finally the head circumference. The complicated process even made John suspected that Ollivander wanted to make a magic wax figure for him. "Mr. Smith, come and try this one, made of cherry wood and unicorn tail hair, 13 inches long." After the measurement, Mr. Ollivander waved his hand, and one of the boxes on the ceiling flew into Mr. Ollivander's hands automatically, and Mr. Ollivander took out the wand in it. John picked up the slender wand and waved it. As expected, there was no response. "It's normal. The wizard's wand is never selected right away, but I just don't know if it's Mr. Ollivander's marketing method." "Oh, maybe you can try this one, a willow, dragon nerve, 11 inches long." John cooperated with Mr. Ollivander to choose the wand. After all, he knew nothing about wands, and there was no other way. "I like picky customers, but it doesn't matter, I can always find one here. Oh, try this." Ollivander gently raised his hand, and a carton flew over from the edge of the wand wall. He took out the wand inside and handed it to John. "Grapevine wood, unicorn feathers, 9 3/4 inch long, it's softer and more elastic." John took the wand and tapped it lightly. The top of the wand burst out with golden sparks, just like fireworks. "That's it, great." Ollivander happily wrapped the wand in silk and put it in the wooden box. He smiled and said to John, "It's a wonderful combination. You must be a little wizard with extraordinary ambition and style. I wish you in Hogwarts. I have a happy study life." "Thank you for your appreciation." John took the wooden box, and at the same time he heard the sound of his mother's high heels stepping on the blue stone floor. The moment the curtain was opened, Mr. Ollivander's voice also sounded. "The price is 6 gallons, thank you for your patronage." Came out of Ollivander's wand shop, went to the clothing store to pick up clothes, and picked a silver grey owl. This trip to Diagon Alley was over. The main reason was that I was delayed for too long in the magic wand shop. When the mother and son returned home, it was already noon. Put the things in his hands back to his room. When John came down from the stairs again, he happened to see two strange owls standing in the living room. Any new things have arrived? John stepped forward to open one of the packages. Inside it happened to be two books, Magic Theory and Dark Force, A Guide to Self-Defense, which were the two missed when Mrs. Smith ordered the book. Another owl sent a letter with the recipient Lynn Smith. John opened the letter based on the principle of no privacy between mother and child. Dear sister, I heard that my cute little nephew received the admission letter from Hogwarts. My mother and I are very happy. Today is the weekend. I wonder if your family can come to the manor for dinner before dinner? Both my mother and I miss it. Our little wizard. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. Another, to my lovely nephew John, your cousin asked me to take it for you. Your dear May Yang. This is a letter from the family. John has a good impression of his aunt who has experienced an unfortunate marriage but is still gentle and amiable. He is also familiar with the manner of the grandmother mentioned in the letter. After all, he lived there for a year when he was a child. His grandmother, Carolina Yang, is a very kind old witch, who looks very similar to the grandmother of the previous life. Maybe all the old people in the world are about the same length. John yelled a few words loudly, briefly narrated the content of the letter with Mrs. Smith, and got his mother's instructions to call his father and talk about it. Love Smith seemed very excited about going to his mother-in-law's house. He promised to go home early today, and then hung up the phone. John put down the phone, turned around and saw his mother who was standing on the stairs, waving the magic wand and sending books and cauldrons into his room. These things took up a lot of space, and John's house was quickly built up. A low wall. Of course, his vinewood wand was stuffed into the sleeve of his shirt by him, and it was not mixed with those school supplies. This is the most important step in his exploration of the magical world. Of course, he can't mix with those things. Don't you want to change the robe? We will go to my grandmother's house later. John shook his head and declined his mother's suggestion, saying that this suit is very good. He didn't think the wizard's robe was so convenient. The large robe could hold more things, but it also limited the flexibility of movement to a certain extent, at least at home. John still prefers casual clothes. Isha Young Manor, a small town on the outskirts of London. The owner of this manor is said to be the offspring of travellers from the Far East many years ago. The original owner was a Chinese named Yang Hang, who settled here and married the daughter of the local nobleman Isabelenka. Having children, their descendants have lived here for generations. And those who live here now are Mrs. Carolina Yang and her daughter, who are over 80 years old. Next to Issa Manor, there is also a not-so-small house. This is an old house belonging to the Smith family. However, since the old Smiths who lived here died, their son and daughter-in-law who lived in Greenwich basically did not live here. After that, now there is only one old butler looking after the house here. Incidentally, the daughter-in-law of the Smiths is Carolina Yang's daughter, Lin Yang. Of course, it's Lynn Smith now. For the residents of the small town, the two families who live in the neighborhood are the same weird, and they rarely communicate with the residents in the town, but the two families are very wealthy, otherwise they would not be able to cultivate so good child. I heard that I am still a university professor. The residents of the town always say that. But such rumors, Love Smith apparently did not know. He received a good elite education since he was a child, so that he has no intersection with the residents of the town. An hour before dinner, the Smith family appeared from the fireplace in the basement of Issa Young Manor. For Mr. Smith, this is not the first time he has used the flu net. As the husband of a witch, his identity has been filed with the Ministry of Magic so as not to trigger the secrecy laws, but it is the experience of these magical means of transportation which made Mr. Smith so curious about the wizarding world. In front of the fireplace, they were greeted by the Yang family's house elf, Kalika. This female elf now serves the Yang family together with her mother and brother, and to them, the Smith family can also be regarded as their masters. Without him, Love Smith and Lynn Smith grew up together. They could not be exposed because of the confidentiality law, but this does not prevent them from developing a good impression of Mr. Smith. And after Love Smith and his little owner became husband and wife, this kind of affection does not need to be kept secret. "Welcome back, my master." Kalika performed a standard noble courtesy and winked at John when she got up. John also returned a look. His friendship with Kalika, the house elf, dates back to when he lived in Yisha Manor. It was a really enjoyable time. Naturally, there is no need for elves to lead the way back to their own home. As a wizard family that has been passed down for hundreds of years in the local area, the Yang family not only has its own family's house elves, but also several wizard servants. These wizards are not very advanced. For the magic cultivation base, it's not a bad thing to be able to find such a low-paying job. After all, the families of these servants still live in the real world, and even two of them are not wizards. They still need ordinary people's money to survive. Love Smith is the one who pays these servants. Of course, this expenditure is only a small amount for him. It's not far from the basement to the living room. Just as John went upstairs, he saw his grandmother wearing a silk robe and glasses sitting on the sofa drinking tea and reading. This old witch is like an ordinary old lady, if you ignore it if she just turned the small wooden square at hand into an exquisite silver cup. "Grandma, I want to kill you." John smiled and walked over to reach Mrs. Carolina's side, holding his grandmother's arm and reading together. He couldn't do it like a child to jump into the grandmother's arms and act like a baby. It would make him physically uncomfortable, but it would still be a sign of closeness. It can be done. In contrast, the Smiths are much more reserved. They greeted Mrs. Carolina and sat on the sofa next to them. Love Smith likes to come to Isha Manor very much. The library here has a lot of interesting books on the wizarding world. Every time he comes, he will read 1 or 2 books. Those books are the legends and secrets of the wizarding world, which are used for entertainment. Reading books will never fail to understand. Ms. Mei Yang, who heard that her younger sister's family had arrived, had also walked downstairs. Behind her was a black-haired girl who looked 2 years older than John. She was John's cousin. This Isa? The future heir of the Young Manor, Bella Young. The relationship between John and Bella Young is very good. Because of the unfortunate marriage of his parents, Bella is obviously closer to his grandmother and John's younger brother, but is indifferent to her mother. There is still some time before the start of the dinner. Mrs. Smith and his mother and sister wanted to talk privately. Mr. Smith went to the library to read. John naturally went to the manor with his cousin Bella. "You reading www.yuyugonshu.com? I heard that you already got the wand? Show it to my sister." Leaving the parents, Bella's face finally showed a lively look, showing great interest in her cousin's wand. John didn't worry about his wand being damaged, and generously drew out his wand and handed it to his cousin. Bella waved her magic wand, but there was no response. It seemed that she wanted to use a little magic to show John. Being a descendant of a pure-blooded wizard family has many advantages. Take the reasonable restraint of minor wizards as an example. In addition to the fact that young wizards who have not yet started learning magic but have already obtained magic wands can perform magic, when the descendants of the pure-blood family are in school, they will not be warned by a letter from the Ministry of Magic if they cast magic during the holidays. John seriously suspects that the relevant laws of the Ministry of Magic were designed for the little wizards who were born in Muggles, and they have serious discriminatory tendencies. On the one hand, there are pure-blood wizards who are taught by their parents and can practice magic during the holidays, and on the other are Muggle-born wizards who teach themselves and cannot use magic during the holidays. The Ministry of Magic's preference is not too obvious. "It looks like you have nothing to do with my magic wand." John tilted his head and retracted his wand, turned the subject away and asked, "Is Hogwarts fun?" "There is nothing fun. If you really want to learn something, you will be very busy. To be honest, there are a lot of homework. Bella Young is currently studying at Ravenclaw College in Hogwarts, and is about to enter the 3rd grade. Of course, entering Ravenclaw is the tradition of the Yang family wizards. By the way, do you want to enter that academy? Bella blinked and said, I heard my mother say that your magic talent is very good. Do you want to enter Gryffindor or Slytherin? Choose Gryffindor or Slytherin. This is not a problem. Because John didn't want to go to any of them. These two colleges indeed have their own advantages. If you choose Gryffindor, you will undoubtedly gain Dumbledore's preference and the various benefits brought by the admission of Harry Potter as the savior in the next few years. If you choose Slytherin, John also had the confidence to quickly integrate into the circle of those pure-blooded little wizards and get mixed up in it. But these two colleges have never been within John's consideration. The reason is also very simple. First of all, he doesn't want to disturb the original plotline too much. Principal Dumbledore of Gryffindor and Dean Snape of Slytherin, both of whom are masters of plutocratic. Without joining these two academies, the possibility of facing these two masters directly is rare. A lot. John has some small tricks to avoid contemplation, such as avoiding sight communication, or constructing a Hilbert space in his mind to encrypt with mathematical equations, unless Dumbledore and Snape can see at a glance the mathematics professor who gave the answer would never be able to break through John's line of defense in an instant. But this will only make him more concerned. Snape is also a potion master, and John didn't want to try the effect of Verita serum prepared by the Half-Blood Prince. Another reason for not wanting to join these two colleges is that no matter which college he joins, it is difficult to guarantee that he will achieve the neutral position he wants. Collective life will give people a wonderful sense of honor, and those who live in it will easily be infected by contrasting emotions. John thinks he is not the kind of person with strong emotions. Once infected by this collective emotion, he will inevitably use his foreseeable future direction and other information to gain an advantage, and then disrupt the original storyline. Then it is not. What a good thing! He had no interest in fighting against the Death Eaters, or even Voldemort, who could not even be mentioned by the name. Just kidding, I finally became a wizard. I don't want to study how to improve magic power to pursue longevity and enjoy a good life. What do I want to do to rule the world every day? I want to go to Ravenclaw, or Hufflepuff. Silence. After a while, Bella took her gaze back as if she had seen some monster. She frowned, her voice filled with puzzlement. Why? These two academies are nothing extraordinary. Perhaps Ravenclaw has some talented wizards who can make a name for themselves, but Hufflepuff is too ordinary. John heard the pause in the cousin's words. He probably wanted to say words like incompetence, but considering John's presence, he didn't say it so bluntly. John said he didn't care about the contempt of his cousin's words. No way, this is the status quo at Hogwarts. Hufflepuff College recruits all the students who are not optimistic about the other three colleges, and it looks like it's shattered. But this is exactly what John likes about this college. He takes in all the students who are not favored by other colleges and allows these ordinary students to go to school. This kind of humane approach reminds John of something that happened in his previous life. Story. Forget it, anyway, the Sorting Hat will help you make a decision when the time comes. Your thoughts are not important. Bella gave up the topic completely, and then suddenly remembered another thing. A smile appeared on her face. I heard that my grandmother has something for you. It is a gift to congratulate you on becoming a little wizard. Really? What gift? John looked very interested. Of course he could vaguely guess what kind of gift he might receive, but it was obviously more important to cooperate with his cousin to make her happy. After all, the unexpected decision I just made seems to have made this cousin a little unhappy. I don't know, but it should be a very precious thing. When I listened to my mother and grandmother, I talked about the words ancient and inheritance. Bella seemed a little regretful for not explaining to her cousin, but this regret was fleeting. She then said, the answer will be revealed at dinner today. I bet that the aunt and grandmother are definitely discussing it now. This matter. Then we might as well go to the restaurant and wait. I happen to be a little thirsty. John made a reasonable proposal, which was immediately approved by Bella. When sister and brother came to the restaurant, a lot of fragrant food was already placed on the long table. Oh, Miss Bella, Master John, it's not time for dinner yet, I think you are here early. A middle-aged female house elf, Kalika's mother, Jasmine, was placing a plate of roast chicken, and when she saw John and Bella walk into the restaurant, she reminded her aloud. Yisha Manor does not treat the elves cruelly like some pure-blooded families, so the house elves of the Yang family live fairly well. The old house elves like Jasmine can even treat some of the little masters. Behave to persuade. Although I can't persuade me, there is no other way. You reading www.youcanshu. CM Don't worry, Jasmine, we are not very hungry yet, but can you give me something to drink? I want to drink watermelon juice. After John finished speaking, he turned to look at Bella. Bella nodded, and then said to the elf, "Give me a glass of orange juice." Jasmine was very satisfied with the two young hosts' willingness to eat on time, adjusted the angle of the roast chicken a little, and disappeared with a pop. Bella ran to the living room to eavesdrop on the parents, and John did not go to the table, but sat down beside a small round table in the corner of the dining room. This small round table was once placed in the garden for afternoon tea. Since Mrs. Carolina changed a new table, this small round table has been moved here. It was Kalika the elf who brought the drink. Her mother was busy making dinner, after all, it was not long before the dinner started. If you are busy, just go, don't wait for me here. John is very fond of elf, this kind of magical creature with extraordinary magical ability, he likes it very much when he read the original book. Kalika and him are already very familiar, so she didn't stay when she heard this, but went to help her mother make dinner. John sat on the chair and squinted his eyes to taste the watermelon juice. The cold taste made him very comfortable. Not more than a minute comfortable, Bella, who had just left, ran back violently. John, I just heard my aunt and grandmother say that you are actually a pure-blooded wizard. Do you know this? Numerous question marks popped up on John's head. You didn't hear it wrong, did you? His father is obviously an ordinary person, how could he be a pure-blood wizard? What are you kidding? John was sitting on the table with huge doubts, and he was fidgeting. He is indeed a little afraid of his father being a little green man, and of course he is also afraid of having a father from a pure-blooded family. Or, I was actually adopted. Oh, my God! John's mind was spinning quickly, trying to think about which of the Holy 28 clan had distinctive features that could match him, and another very serious matter. In his impression, if you don't count the thin-blooded pure-blood family like your grandmother's family, there is almost no pure-blood family in Hogwarts that is not Slytherin-related, except for the Weasley family. Of course he will not be a member of the Weasley family, at least his hair is black. The sky is a lesson, he doesn't want to have a relationship with those pure-blood wizard families in Slytherin at all. Perhaps noticing that her grandson was a little embarrassed, Mrs. Carolina blinked at her daughter. Then the elegant old lady took out a delicate small wooden box from under the table and waved it to John's. Before. My dear, we haven't officially congratulated you on being a prospective freshman at Hogwarts. John glanced at the box in front of him, always feeling that there was a very big secret hidden inside. He ignored the box, just set it aside, raised the wine glass and touched his grandmother at a distance, and took a sip of the watermelon juice inside. Why don't you open it? This is a pretty good gift. Mrs. Carolina said with a smile. John's heart became more and more disturbed. The contents of the box or the truth or something are Schrodinger's cat to him. As long as he doesn't open it, he won't know the final result. I think it's better to wait for dinner and go back to the room to see it. It might be a little bit mysterious. Mrs. Carolina laughed, but Mrs. Smith turned her head and motioned to John to open the box. I have to listen to the mother's order. After all, no matter who the father is, the mother will definitely have no problem. John reluctantly picked up the box, ready to accept the final result. Does father know about this? Before opening the box, he still wanted to determine if the truth touched his bottom line. Open it, dear John. Mr. Smith obviously didn't understand what his son meant. He replied, I just learned about it just now. To be honest, I'm as shocked as you. That is to say, what he guessed is actually correct. But why do you say this with a smile, father? Is this something to be happy about? John was a little surprised and confused, but didn't show it. Isn't he a real kid? Some emotions can be handled very well. Then he gently turned on the box and opened the box. Very good, there are a few stacked sheets of paper inside. Because it has been left for a long time, it has become a little yellow. Could it be the letter left by the father who has never met? John opened the pieces of paper with a slightly trembling hand, looked at it again with great courage, then silently put the paper down, and looked at his mother with inquisitive eyes. He didn't understand. But one thing is obvious, this is not a letter, but something like a contract. This is the title deed to the Smiths' old house, the old house next to the manor. It was not Mrs. Lynn Smith who explained aloud, but Mr. Smith who was sitting next to her. And his tone rose, obviously in an excited tone. I only learned today that the Smith family was once a wizarding family, but it has not been a wizard for several generations. But John, my proud son, you inherited the blood of the wizard of our Smith family and became a new little wizard. Starting today, our family's old house and Gringotts vault will be yours. John. Sounds pretty awesome, but I didn't understand it too much. Fortunately, Mrs. Carolina is a considerate old lady. She explained to her grandson in time, the Smith family was still a wizarding family a few generations ago. At that time, our two families lived together, but I don't know why. A few generations ago, the blood of the wizards of the Smith family was suddenly cut off. Even if they were intermarried with other pure-blood wizard families, they did not give birth to magical children. This phenomenon continued until your father. After discussing with your grandfather, I decided try it again. I didn't expect that you really inherited the wizard blood. This is really incredible news. Well, let me sort it out. My father is actually a descendant of a pure-blood wizard family. He chose to marry his mother in order to awaken the blood of the family wizard. Is that right? Simply put, yes. Mr. Smith nodded, but your mother and I really love each other. We didn't know about this before. I thought you just inherited your mother's wizarding blood. What a coincidence, he thinks so too. With a series of horrible conjectures triggered by Bella's foreshadowing, although this answer sounds incredible, it is more acceptable to John. The Smiths were very satisfied with the receptive ability shown by their sons. The expected surprise did not appear, which made them very happy. Then, this matter is settled like this. I will contact you tomorrow to renovate the old house. You can live in your grandmother's house for a few days, and then you can move in. It may be unaccustomed to live alone. You may be able to invite Bella. We'll go to live together. What? John suspected that he was under the forgetting curse. Why didn't he remember when he agreed to it, and, why should I live by myself? Don't you two stay with me. This, I'm afraid it will not work. Mr. Smith looked distressed. You know, Mom and Dad both have jobs. It's better to live in Greenwich. And it's good to live here alone. I heard your mom say that you can live here. You are free to use magic, and the Ministry of Magic will not send you warning letters. Yes, I know all this. John suspected that his father was not telling the truth, and then asked, but Mom doesn't need to go to work for work. Let her stay here with me. Don't worry, John. This time, it was not Mrs. Smith who spoke, but Aunt May, who had been silent. The middle-aged witch said in a gentle voice, Aunt will take good care of you. Your family has finally reappeared in the blood of wizards. I miss your father. Mom needs to give birth to some younger siblings. John didn't think the matter of having a few children was decided temporarily, but he was just an 11-year-old kid, so what could he decide? Looking at the expectant eyes of the opposite parents, John finally defeated the aunt and grandmother's gentle gaze and Bella's curious eyes, and agreed to this request. After all, Britain has a relatively small population. In order to prevent wizards from being completely cut off, giving birth is a major event. He also expressed his understanding. As for living on his own, he can live at his grandmother's house, but he's also very close anyway. However, when I start school, you will come to see me off, right? Oh, of course. Mr. Smith nodded quickly. We will send you and Bella to the station together. After all, he still wants to see what platform 9 3/4 looks like. John nodded. Although he knew that non-witch parents might not be able to enter the platform, in theory his father was a dumb gun. Some parts of the world are different from the original, just like the shops in Diagon Alley are not in the original. It's as shabby as described. After dinner, the Smiths used the Flow network back to Greenwich, but John stayed. Bella Yang seemed the happiest. She usually stayed alone in the manor during her vacation. There was no other wizard family living here, so no one would play with her at all. At this moment, there is a cousin to accompany her, and she will stay with her forever. She is so happy. But John didn't want to play with Bella very much, playing with the little girl who was in puberty, that would kill him. My dear sister, if you are really bored, why don't you discuss something about magic learning with me? By the way, tell me about Hogwarts. I think we must have there are many things to talk about. His mind is full of Harry Potter spells collection. But even if he was practicing magic, he didn't want to move today. He used the Flow net several times in a row, and he had been walking around Diagon Alley for most of the day. His young body was really tired. Well then, you go to bed first. Bella confirmed that John was really tired, and she had to give up the plan to start entertaining tonight. Then I will teach you 2 simple magics tomorrow, say good. John nodded, went back to the furnished guest room and went to sleep. Mr. Smith moved very fast. When John got up the next day, he heard the rumbling sound of a machine outside. What are you doing outside? He put on his clothes and walked to the corridor. Bella was lying by the window looking at the house under construction on the opposite side. Because of the disappearance of the blood of the wizard, the magic barrier of the Smith family's old house has long since disappeared, and the magic energy inside has also dissipated. Now it is an ordinary small manor. Since it is too old to live in, it is natural to renovate it. John looked back from the construction workers, and suddenly saw Aunt May talking to an old man. Oh, that's the old housekeeper who was here to see the house before. He is getting older, so the uncle gave him a sum of money and asked him to go back. Bella explained in a timely manner. John thought of another question: if there is no housekeeper, would I want to live alone in such a big house? Not really. Grandma prepared a big gift for you. It can't be regarded as a gift. Bella's voice was a little envious. Part of your Smith family's inheritance belongs to Grandma, but those inheritance are used by Grandma. It's gone, and I replaced it with some of the more precious materials, so this time Grandma bought you a house elf, which is considered as a gift to your housekeeper. House elf? This gift is too big. Naturally, John would not believe that it was because of those inheritances. A declining wizard family whose bloodline of wizards had become thinner, and part of the legacy left by it was placed in the vault. Even if there is too much, there is not much left. Where it goes? It is probably because my grandmother loves her little grandson that she bought the house elf at a high price. John doesn't know how much an elf is worth, but according to the original book, the Weasley family is a sacred 28. If one of the clan doesn't own an elf, then it will definitely not be cheap. Is this what it feels like to be rich? Suddenly inherited the mansion and the treasury. Me grandmother is still a rich woman, pure-blooded little wizard. John Smith, who is about to become a Hogwarts student, feels very satisfied at this moment. By the way, my aunt said she didn't say how long it would take to renovate. John can't wait to live in his old house and see his house elf. It is estimated that it will take 3 or 4 days. By the way, my uncle also said that if you have any ideas about the decoration of the house, you can tell my mother to let the workers help you. John nodded, turned, and went downstairs to find his aunt. Hey, don't forget that we are going to play together in the afternoon. Bella's shout came from behind. John didn't look back, just waved his hand to indicate that he knew. He is now full of house design. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com had no money in his previous life and couldn't afford to buy a big house, but he still read a lot of decoration design. The lighting must be good. He doesn't like the dim feeling. The kind of light is not a sufficient room will hurt your eyesight at first glance. Just look at Dumbledore and you will know that wizards are also short-sighted. He is also going to imitate the magic practice room in the responsive house, and create a similar room for practicing spells. The library can't be left down, there must be a place to store books and do research. He has not forgotten that he wants to become a magician. The goal. I feel that buying a book will also cost a lot of money. It's better to buy a second-hand book, maybe it will be like a Half-Blood Prince, and there may be some other gains. The thoughtful John shared his thoughts with his aunt. Mei Yang was not surprised by the novel idea of this nephew. This kid often said something out of his age when he was young. This is not true. Strange. Besides, the owner of this house is still John, and how to transform it still depends on John's idea. But the practice room you want may be slower to get out. That kind of room needs magical reinforcement. After these Muggle workers are finished, my aunt will invite some wizards to help you cast spells on the house. John agreed with this point. Most of the wizards' houses need to be blessed with some protective spells such as the Muggle expulsion curse, which he has already seen in the original book. It's better to finish the work soon. I still want to preview the magic that I will learn in the first grade before school starts. John appropriately showed his expectations for magic and school, which made Mei Yang happier. Don't worry, my aunt will do it as soon as possible. You can go and learn the magic of the first grade with your cousin. I think Bella will be very willing to tutor you. 2 weeks before he went to Hogwarts, John finally lived in his own old house, and he lived in with him, as well as his textbooks, clothes, owls, cousin Bella, and a bookstore in Diagon Alley bought 2 gallons and a pile of old books. Some of the magical objects now placed in John's study from the Gringotts Smith family vault, and John's house elf, Caldy. The imprint of the elf's enslavement has been transferred to John's hands, but when John saw it for the first time, he felt that the elf had not lived well at the original owner's house. He looked thin, small, and taciturn. It took John a lot of work to adjust Caldy to a state where he can communicate normally. Such a precious magical creature as an elf, it would be a pity to use it as a slave. Therefore, in addition to doing housework and 3 meals a day, Caldy also does John practice magic sparring. Although John knew a lot of spells, his ability to cast spells was so weak that it was a mess. The spells seemed simple, but it was very difficult to actually cast them. Whether magic can work smoothly is actually a matter that is extremely dependent on the wizard's own ability. John almost meets the standards in the main points of the book, and there is Bella's auxiliary teaching next to it, but it is still the most basic floating magic. Can't show it. Hermione? How did Granger master most of the first grade magic in a month? With his mind full of questions, John's training became harder and harder, and he was almost immersed in magic practice and couldn't extricate himself. Fortunately, hard work is always effective. The learning ability cultivated in the previous life has brought John another level of talent. As long as he enters the door of magic, he will not be unable to use it, or even be able to. By analogy, try different applications of the magic in different environments. Just like in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Ron used a floating curse to hammer down a troll. Thank you for the exam-oriented education. In just half a month, with John's unremitting efforts, he finally mastered most of the spells that he had to learn in the first grade, and also had a certain grasp of transfiguration and potions. Regarding his efforts, Bella showed a certain degree of confusion, because she had never had any problems with her studies while studying at Ravenclaw College. Even if her grades were only at a mid-level level, she had never studied. What's wrong with it? So Bella couldn't think of what a little wizard who hadn't enrolled in so hard to practice the spell. Is he afraid that he would not be able to graduate? Naturally, John would not tell the real reason for doing this. He was just preparing for the coming dark age in the future. Otherwise, he could not wait for Harry Potter to defeat Voldemort and he would be killed by the Death Eaters. Cousin Bella was 2 years older than him. When Voldemort was resurrected, she just caught up with Bella's 7th grade graduation. When she hid in the house, naturally there would be no danger. John knows very well that his grandmother, Carolina Young, is definitely a witch with powerful magic power. And another reason is that what he has in his mind is also very dangerous for him. Just in case, occlumency must be learned quickly, and the magic spell, an indispensable magic for night travel, must also be learned. He is so difficult. The pen in John's hand paused on the paper, smearing a smear of ink. After sorting out his messy thoughts, he tore off the dirty note paper and threw it into the trash. His study has a protective curse, except for him and the elf Caldy, it is difficult for others to enter easily. This is also to prevent Bella from seeing some magic books. Without exception, those magic books involve the unforgivable curse. When the elf helps him sort out the trash, it will also use magic to destroy all the trash, so that some of the words written by John will not be discovered by others. Even if it is written in simplified Chinese. According to John's idea, actually entering Hogwarts at this time is not a particularly good thing. After all, he didn't know much about Harry Potter's first-year students. The one he knew best was the Asian girl who fell in love with Harry Potter, Chu Zhang, so he had to be careful with get along with your classmates so as not to miss anything. So the image of a lonely, eccentric, and mediocre little wizard who likes to read bizarre books appeared in John's mind. Hey? Isn't this the image of a witch from the previous life? John sighed silently, and stuffed the notebook in his hand into the small suitcase. This small suitcase is filled with space expansion curse and weight loss curse, and it has been stuffed with all the things needed to start school and a few easy-to-action casual clothes. It is not very heavy to carry, which prevents John from having to carry the trouble of box admission. Bella also has one of the same suitcase, and John's one was used by his mother when he was a child. LV box is very durable and its style is not out of date. School will start in 2 days, and John is still looking forward to it. Aside from the irritating things just now, Hogwarts is definitely a holy place for learning magic. Both the library and the room for needs, UU Reading www.uuganshu.com has a large number of magic books, and every professor who teaches at Hogwarts has extremely high magic skills. Harry Potter 2nd grade at that time, the professor of defense against the dark arts, except for Guydrol Lockhart, was a liar who could only forget the spell. However, if the liar can do so successfully, he must be outstanding. John does have knowledge like the professor asks for the Oblivion Curse. For these magics that involve memory, each is quite advanced and difficult. Self-taught. Of course, that is 2 years later. After recounting the things to bring, John stuffed his own collection of several books and a set of old crucibles into the ring on his finger. This ring is a collection in the Smith family's vault. The effect is similar to that in a Chinese novel. There is a small hidden compartment on the silver ring, plus the space expansion curse and weight loss curse. There is a cubic space in it, which is very convenient for carrying some small items. John. Are you ready? We're leaving now. Bella's voice came from downstairs. She was here to tell John to leave. Tonight they will go back to Greenwich via the Flow network, and then go from Greenwich to King's Cross Station. Okay, come down now. John locked the door of the study, glanced at Bella, who was wearing a waterspun long skirt downstairs, and solemnly explained the precautions for him not to be at home with Kaldi next to him. Such as avoiding Muggle intrusion, avoiding others from entering the magic practice room and study room, even his parents cannot. Kaldi solemnly stated that he would not let down the owner's expectations, and then watched John leave. This is the eve of John's journey to Hogwarts, and there are still 5 years before the storm of the magical world arrives. When John woke up, it was 7 o'clock in the morning on September 1st. I slept the last night in my long-lost room, and it was not too late for John to wake up. Good morning, Bella. Bella was changing shoes at the door of the room when she spoke. She wore a pair of black lambskin boots, and John and her little suitcase were on her right. My aunt asked me to go up and wake you up just now. We are going to leave. We can go to London to have something to eat while it is still early. God, I really want to eat McDonald's now. John went to the door and opened the shoe cabinet. Mrs. Smith prepared a pair of new leather shoes for him. Mom, won't you go with us? John asked while changing shoes. Yes, let your father take you there, I think Bella will take good care of you. Lynn Smith's face showed a gentle smile. I think I might go to the hospital now. You and Dad move really fast. John whispered, under Mrs. Smith's active confession. He naturally knew that his mother had already had a child again, and the wizard was always very sensitive to physical conditions. I just don't know if it's a younger brother or younger sister. At McDonald's near King's Cross Station, they settled for a brunch. John and Bella rushed into King's Cross Station at about 10 o'clock. Love wanted to follow in, but John refused. You can't enter this platform without magic. Dad, don't you feel sad? It's sad to feel that you want to enter but can't get it. Knowing his father, Emma Ruozzi, John poked Mr. Smith's heart with a single sentence, directly dispelling his father's little wool. After bidding farewell to Love Smith, Bella, who turned and walked into the station, asked in a low voice why John refused Mr. Smith to enter the station. My dad usually wants to know things about the wizarding world. It would be cruel to let him in but not let him follow us into the platform, or that we would let him in and he couldn't get in. John said lightly. He took out the ticket from his pocket and looked at it, and continued, Let's go, we are going to platform 9 3/4. Bella quietly followed John. Although she usually likes to drag John to play, sometimes she can't keep up with John's brain circuit. Maybe John and the professors at Hogwarts will have a good chat. John didn't pay attention to his cousin's random thoughts. He focused his energy on observing whether there were any familiar people around him. He was telling the truth, but he didn't explain it completely. Mr. Smith was not allowed to come in. On the one hand, he was really afraid of piercing his father's heart. On the other hand, he was also afraid that his father would meet the parents of other Hogwarts students. For example, a certain enthusiastic Mrs. Weasley. Since my own family has no intersection with the Weasley family, it is better not to know each other. It is not a good thing to have a relationship with the main force of the Order of the Phoenix, especially one of the protagonist trio. Ron Weasley's enrollment next year. King's Cross Station still has a lot of people. After all, it is the largest railway station in Europe, which carries a large part of the transportation demand. John, who has known the plot for a long time, is naturally familiar with the road. Finding the platform is not difficult. And Bella, who was somewhat nervous, didn't find anything the same. After all, she had been used to John's mature and steady for many years. The pit stop time he chose was very good. At 10 o'clock in the morning, there were not too many people, and they hardly met the students at Hogwarts. Until the two of them rushed into platform 9 3/4, Bella also did not see a familiar figure. We arrived too early, the express has just pitted into the station. The two siblings found a carriage on the train that had just stopped and sat down. After placing the small suitcase next to the carriage board, John heard Bella's complaint in his ears. "It's good to come in early." John looked at the crowds on the 9 3/4 platform, one by one, pushing the trolley and carrying the huge suitcase. The little wizards were ready to get on the train, and said to Bella sitting across from him, "You think about it, get in the car with those little wizards carrying heavy boxes, and then maybe help them carry something, and then thank each other. It will be troublesome to think about it." "Bella! Why is my cousin so indifferent? The other little wizards are so excited, why are you so calm? Such a precocious character, really should be assigned to Slytherin, right?" It is very difficult for unspoken Tuco to express it all with his eyes, so John did not receive even a little bit of information from his cousin. He just sat in his seat and prayed silently not to meet or hear the familiar first name. But destiny often just likes to joke with him. "Bella Senpai, good noon." After John enjoyed a moment of quiet, a gentle young boy's voice rang in his ears. John looked up and saw a handsome and gentle boy with a big smile. The box stood at the door of the compartment. "Can I sit here? It's rare to meet acquaintances." "Oh, of course you can." Bella put on a smiley face in an instant, pulled the little boy's box in, and introduced the two people between John and the little boy. "This is my cousin, John Smith. He is also a pure-blooded wizard. John, this is Cedric, he is also a Hufflepuff student. Didn't you say that you want to go to Hufflepuff? Come and meet." "I said that I wanted to go to Hufflepuff, not for you to be close to others." John, who didn't realize who the boy was in front of him, reluctantly reached out and shook his hand, and smiled reluctantly. "John Smith. Cedric Diggory. Oh, hello." John withdrew his hand and let Cedric be dragged by his cousin to speak, but he reacted immediately. "Cedric Diggory, what a familiar name this is. Before, I was thinking about avoiding Ravenclaw's Chujong, but I forgot to watch out for boys." But why did Cedric know Bella? John looked strangely at the opposite Cedric, who was smiling gently, as if he had seen the omen star floating above the head of the Hufflepuff warrior. "I feel that Bella is interesting to this Cedric. Puppy love is not a good thing. After waiting, it's better to take some time to vaccinate the cousin. With so many good-looking boys at Hogwarts, even if you find a Slytherin to fall in love, it's better than finding someone who is destined to die. Is it strong?"